Hello and welcome to ATG, the podcast. And I'm very pleased to be talking to Andrew Smeall this afternoon, who is VP Product Innovation at Sage. Welcome, Andrew.
Hi, Michael. Yeah, happy to be here.
So let's start right at the beginning. You studied fascinatingly Chinese at university. Where did the interest in Chinese come from?
I was interested in Chinese because I studied abroad in China, and I wanted to study abroad. I wanted to go to Russia actually, but when I was in university, Russia wasn't a very stable place, and one of my really close friends at the time wanted to go to China, so I changed plans, went to China with him, and then I had an amazing experience, and I wanted to continue to pursue it. So then I studied that at university.
Fascinating. So I believe you lived in China for 2 years.
A little more than 2 years actually. So I spent, including my time studying abroad during university, I spent about 18 months in Beijing studying Chinese, and then after university, I spent 2 years on a teaching fellowship in Guangzhou in the south of China, teaching English at Sun Yat-sen University.
Fascinating. So how's your Chinese?
It's okay. It's an endless source of disappointment. I mean, I think uh, I can speak some Chinese, but it's not something I use in my day-to-day professional life very much anymore. I'm still, very interested in learning languages as a hobby, and I'm interested in China. But my Chinese is fine. It's good for somebody who, for the average person, it's pretty good.
I'm sure it's better than mine. You then worked at a place called the Center on U.S.-China Relations. What did that involve?
So that is a think tank based out of the Asia Society in New York, run by someone named Orville Schell, who's a journalist who studied China for a long time. They out of that think tank, they produce research on U.S.-China environmental relations, U.S.-China economic relations. At the time, I was there a little bit on North Korea as well, and so I worked as a program officer, so somebody who organized research projects. But that was sort of where I got interested in media, originally media and technology, because what we were trying to do was take the white papers that we produced and maybe make them more interesting than just a PDF. So we were building microsites for the research projects or doing video projects for the research projects. So I got involved in building those microsites, so building early versions of WordPress sites or Flash sites. That was sort of the genesis of my publishing career, although I didn't see it that way at the time.
Discoverability is a topic that we'll come back to later on because I think it's been part of your remit for many years. So how did you come about starting for Hindawi? And I believe not satisfied with travelling to China, for that one you travelled to Cairo.
Yes. So I left Asia Society to go do an MBA and at NYU. And NYU worked with a nonprofit called Endeavor that organized students to do consulting projects with startups in a number of developing countries, but a lot in the Middle East and Africa and South America. And Hindawi was one of the startups that participated in that Endeavor program. And so I was interested in doing something with media and technology. And initially I was thinking maybe something that involved Chinese as well, but Hindawi was just a really cool opportunity to be part of a technology startup in the media space. And the fact that it was in Cairo wasn't really part of the equation exactly, but it was cool to be able to go to a new place. And so that attracted to me initially. And then once I met Ahmed Hindawi, then I was just really interested to work with him because he was such a powerful personality and visionary.
Did you know about open access at the time?
No, not at all. No, I didn't know anything about research publishing or open access at the time. I learned all that once I started at Hindawi.
So you acquired your interest in open access from that time. So is this before you started your MBA or afterwards?
So it was during. So
Okay.
the summer. So usually, or at least in the U.S., MBAs are often 2 years, and in the summer, in between the 2 years, you do some sort of job placement. and I was looking for something like this type media and technology, and I worked there in the summer between the 2 years of my MBA in Cairo, and then after graduating, I did a brief stint at a technology startup in New York, and then went back to Hindawi about a year after I graduated.
And your role when you rejoined them was chief digital officer, which is quite a sort of quite a leap from your initial involvement.
Well, there was a number of hops to that. So it was I can't remember what my title was. I think it was like you know head of editorial transformation or something like
Mm.
that. But I went to um, it was an interesting time for Hindawi. So what had happened while I was finishing up my MBA and spending that time at the startup was that um, Hindawi decided to open a London office and then restructure the company to some extent to have a team in London and still the team in Cairo, and then eventually in a few years later building a technology division in Romania. And so when I rejoined, I then rejoined in London. So then I moved to London to rejoin as part of the London office. And we were building out a team there. And I was initially working on non-journals related things. I was working on a video business that we were trying to build that we ended up actually divesting to Sage, or divesting the assets to Sage. So I was working on that, and so I was working on sort of journal businesses alongside the journals, and then we started to consolidate the focus more on the journals business. I went to work, and then I started working with Paul, and initially it was addressing gaps in the technology that we had to address problems. So building our first research integrity systems, building some of the marketing systems that we use to do business development for the journals. So I was working in those areas, and then that just slowly expanded to the chief digital officer role over 4 or 5 years.
Understood. So one of the things you're remembered for at Jindawi is the development of this Phenom publishing platform, which came out of a sort of various initiatives. So why was there the need for a new framework?
So we were lucky at Hindawi that we had our own in-house platform from very early on. We built a first generation end-to-end publishing platform in the early 2000s before I started. So the team that was in place there in Egypt had successfully built, and we're running all of our journals on this platform. And everything from submission, peer review, production, marketing, all of that running in a home-built platform. And we we were able to do that in part because we were a born digital publisher with a highly standardized business. It was a lot easier for us to do it than, say, trying to take a legacy publisher and move them onto a new system. That's just a whole several orders of magnitude harder challenge. When you can design your business and your system together, it's a lot more achievable. So we had a platform already that was from the early 2000s, and it had sort of proved to us that it was possible to do this. But we realized that, so in 2016 or so, that platform was getting long in the tooth. Technology had changed quite a bit. We had built a lot of it before the cloud was really a thing. We had moved pieces to the cloud, but there were challenges inherent in that. We had made some decisions in terms of technology choices and things like that maybe 10 years later, the industry had moved on. And so we decided it was time to rebuild, and so we started from that old system as a blueprint, and then decided to rebuild everything in 2017.
Remarkable. Do you think the technology, the fact that you were born digital, is this one of the reasons why there was this dramatic shift in the publishing landscape in around this time? The three big open access publishers, MDPI, Frontiers, Hindawi, all sort of acquired a considerable market share. Was technology the reason for it?
I think the business model shift was probably the most important thing, but technology had an important part to play in that business model shift, which was that basically it's very difficult for a small publisher that's starting up, especially if you're not based in one of the traditional big publishing markets, so the US or Western Europe. It's very hard to compete with the library sales teams that large publishers have. These are B2C businesses, and they're able to put people in the room with librarians all around the world, either with their own staff or through things like EBSCO or something like that. But they're able to have these relationships with all of these libraries around the world. And that's very hard to break into. And what open access did as a business model was enable a direct to researcher business model. So instead of having to make your revenue by selling subscriptions to libraries, you're able to make your revenue by going directly to researchers through various marketing channels. So email obviously is the one that everyone thinks about, but through other forms, through advertising, through social media, through being at conferences, through all those other things, but able to go direct to researchers. And that's what Hindawi and MDPI and Frontiers were able to operationalize, to make real. And technology it was a big part of making that scale and work, but probably the business model was what unlocked that.
At the same time as the dramatic growth from these three publishers, there's also been kind of a parallel growth in integrity issues. And do you think this new model of working direct with researchers contributed to those integrity problems, or would they have happened anyway?
Well, I think that's often how open access was attacked. Especially in the early days. Attacked as something that was where the incentives were misaligned and it was likely to cause integrity issues. And I can say that as someone who worked at an open access publisher, I wasn't there in the earliest days, but I was there in the sort of middle period of open access growth. That was something we thought about every day. We were very actively trying to fight against those issues and prevent research integrity issues from occurring where we could. I mean, a big reason being that we understood very well that, allowing runaway article growth and without quality control would very quickly kill the business. There wouldn't, that might be, you might see, a spike in submissions for a brief period of time. And then as your journal reputation tanked, your business would go away. So journal reputations remain critical to the success of those businesses, and those had to be protected. So we were very proactive about that. I think research integrity is obviously a very complicated topic. I think the fact that we see more research integrity issues today is not necessarily a bad thing. Partly it's a function of looking harder. It's a function of getting better at looking, and it's good, and also being more transparent about these issues when we find them. It's good that we report on these issues and we're able to talk about them openly. I think that, the first retractions, I think, were published in the 1750s in Philosophical Transactions of the Royal Society. It goes back to the beginning. It's not a new problem. That doesn't mean it's not something really important to fight against, and it doesn't mean that we should be blasé about it or say that it will always be here. But I do think that it is something that is always around, whether you're in an open access journal or a hybrid journal or a subscription journal. And as publishers, it's our job to do our best to keep trying to address it and make sure that we protect the scholarly record.
You talked about a publisher that was born digital and the advantage of working with what essentially was a startup. You then, after Hindawi was acquired by Wiley, you stayed with Wiley for a couple of years, and now you're working with Sage. So you have the opportunity of comparing new publishers and old publishers. How do you find it?
Well, I think maybe I was naive a bit when I went to Wiley and now at Sage, just thinking it would be easy to reproduce the Hindawi playbook in terms of the standardization of the journals and the ability to move journal processes onto digital processes. It's hard. It's a huge challenge. Not only sort of it's standardized. We often talk about it in terms of standardizing. I don't think that's exactly the right word. It's okay for journals to be different. We want variety to flourish. We want editors to experiment because that's how we're going to get better and learn how to do new things and communicate research in more interesting ways. But the challenge is that you need to capture these processes in a way that machines can understand. So if it's okay for us to have 50 different article types and 50 different terms for decisions that we make and 50 different names for various editorial roles. There can be quite a lot of variety. Machines can handle that. But what we need is rigorous documentation of what each of those terms means, where it sits in the workflow, what happens before, what happens after. And that's a huge amount of work. And it's new work that those teams aren't necessarily have the capacity to do. So they're busy, trying to recruit editors, trying to understand the scope of their subject area, trying to make sure that their journals stay relevant and interesting to readers. And they're not ready to go spend, months in workshops documenting processes and translating those into change management plans and changes on Scholar One or Editorial Manager or their journal websites. It's a ton of work, and I have a lot of admiration for my colleagues at Wiley who did incredible amount of work to get through that transformation process, and now my colleagues at Sage who are going through that as well, just making sure that everything is rigorously documented and able to be moved on to a workflow.
So you think it's a metadata challenge that all publishers have to face?
Exactly. And I think that it's a metadata challenge to some extent more than a workflow challenge. The metadata are the Legos that allowed you to build coherent workflows. The workflows come next. Then you can put the pieces together in different orders or with different flavors, or allows, one subject area to work this way or another subject area to work that way. But until you have the standard Legos, you can't fit them together. The pegs aren't the same size as the holes, so to speak.
It's fascinating. I remember finding out to my horror that trying to identify a research article from XML tagging is not always a straightforward exercise. There's a classic example of what would appear to be obvious as being actually sort of far more difficult than it could be. Let's talk a bit about your current job. Your VP Product Innovation. What does that involve?
So I'm VP Product Innovation for the research business at Sage, which is the journals business. So my job is technology strategy for the research business. What platforms do we build? What platforms do we buy? How do we work with the Sage technology team to develop technology in-house? Where does it make more sense to go with vendors and buy technology on the market? And then how is technology changing our business? What new ways of working does it unlock, or what new ways of using our content does it imply? So how can we be ready to benefit or provide those new services to researchers?
Sage is an interesting publisher because there's a lot of humanities, social science, but there's also quite a lot of medical stuff. So you've got quite a big range of subjects.
Right. Yeah. Sage covers the whole gamut. So STM, HSS, and that's great because it means we have to do things different ways. We can't have one process. We need to think about what works for HSS, what works for STM. We can make experiments that, with different parts of the business. The fact that Sage has grown through these very interesting acquisitions, iOS Press and Marianne Liebert, unlocks a huge potential for the portfolio. So it's a really exciting time to be at Sage.
Mm-hmm. Open access is, there's been a steady trend towards open access in the last sort of 10, 15 years, and it's in the region of 50% of all scholarly publishing. So is that kind of stat how it is at Sage?
Yes, I mean, Sage is similar to the rest of the market. I would say that open access at Sage is growing really fast. It's a really important part of our business. Not necessarily something that Sage was known for historically, I think it's fair to say, but something we take really seriously and are growing. But also, of course, just a part of what we do. We take really seriously other models. We have subscription journals, hybrid journals, diamond journals, subscribe to. We experiment with many different models, and they're all an important part of what we do.
Mm-hmm. But at the macro level, the trend to open access, the sort of the has decelerated somewhat. So it's not proceeding as fast as it was, and some pessimists have claimed it will be tens or even hundreds of years before the entire market gets to open access. Do you think that matters?
I don't think it will ever get to 100%, and no, I don't think that it needs to get to 100% as a requirement. I don't think that would. I don't know, but that doesn't feel to me like it's necessarily the right solution. I don't think open access, at least the way we've defined it so far, works for every discipline or for every library or for every researcher in the same way. So I think we saw a wave of growth driven by Gold OA, which had a huge impact on the industry. Now, I think that maybe that impact of Gold OA is slowing down, but now we're seeing new things emerge, like transformational agreements between publishers and libraries, or subscribe to open style models. And so those may drive another wave of impact. But I think, I think the principle behind or open access, and maybe the drivers behind it, remain true. So that the idea that publicly funded research should be public, the idea that early access to research should can help drive positive outcomes for society. I think those remain true. But I think it's we've also discovered important, equity issues with open access potentially. If you're moving the gate from a gate to readers to a gate to authors, because some authors are now excluded because they don't have the funds to cover gold open access fees, that seems like a problem, and not potentially a better situation than having the gate at the reading level. So I don't think we have figured out all the models that we need to figure out yet. There's still change to be worked through, and I don't expect us to get to 100% quickly.
One of the unintended consequences of open access seems to have been that many scholarly societies have a kind of reduced role from their scholarly publishing. Do you think scholarly societies will survive open access?
Yes, because I think, first of all, scholarly societies can publish open access like any other publisher, and there's the potential for them to do that, and maybe they've been a bit slower to react in some fields, but they're figuring it out and they're getting there, whether it's with a publishing partner or on their own. But also because scholarly societies, I think, do something fundamentally different and important, which is form research communities. And so that community aspect of the society, I believe, still exists. The need for that survives journal publishing, and so maybe if there's a rebalancing of revenue that happens from journal publishing towards other things, that may be a disruptive to societies in the short term. But I think their importance is still really critical in terms of how groups of researchers come together and communicate with each other, researchers who share the same research interests.
Do you think also there's a question mark over the whole future of the journal, because with the move away from impact factors based around a journal towards individual articles, do you think there's a future for the journal?
I mean, this is a question it's a question that's been around for a long time, and I think people have been predicting the demise of the journal for a long time. My personal opinion, I believe journals will still exist. I think that their form may change. That they are fundamentally a sort of curatorial process. So here's a bunch of content that an editor, say is relevant and in scope and interesting and of a certain level of quality for my audience of readers. I don't think that curatorial function in the abstract goes away. So I think that this idea of how you help readers find the research that's most interesting to them remains. And okay, speaking for myself and not for Sage or my colleagues, I think some disruption of the impact factor and of the sort of traditional ways that journals are marketed and sold is probably a good thing for the industry. Like change is good. It will drive us to do new things, be able to adopt new technologies, allow new entrants to compete, and I would welcome that. But no, I don't think that in the short term, at least, you're going to see journals disappear in 5-10 years.
It's good to hear. Moving to open science, there's a small number of publishers and sort of interested parties who are very keen on completely different models of publishing, such as the publish, review, curate model. The idea of open peer review, a very different kind of publishing landscape. Do you think this kind of model is a threat to traditional publishers, or that they might embrace it?
So speaking generally first, so not specifically about publish, review, curate, but generally, I think it's helpful to see publishers as a service provider. Publishers, what they do is a number of tasks around the communication of scholarly research that researchers or librarians don't necessarily want to do themselves. So, that includes things like performing peer review, but the classic things. So disseminating research to make sure it reaches research, making sure research gets indexed in databases, and transforming research from one format to another. So from Word to XML to PDF to different flavors of XML depending on where it's going. Archiving research so that it's available for the future generations for 50, 100, 200, 1,000 years, thinking in those timeframes. Making sure that so then ensuring quality standards, credentialing research, asserting priority. Those functions, I believe publishers do them because researchers don't want to do those things. Researchers don't want to spend time wrangling XML formats. They want to spend time doing research. And so Publish, Review, Curate, or other models like that, they may be a threat to traditional publishers in the sense that they might transform how publishing works. But I don't think they're necessarily a threat to the existence of a need for services to do these publishing tasks. And maybe they allow they allow competition to flourish. Maybe they allow new publishers to emerge. But I think fundamentally, researchers and librarians will still want an organization to help them with that process of converting and communicating and classifying and storing research.
Mm-hmm. So you've talked about using technology to assist at discovery and so on. Do you think that technology can solve the research integrity problem in some way?
I guess it's unfortunately not that easy, right? It's like the unstoppable force meets the immovable object. So technology is going to be a tool used by both sides, and so it's going to enable new forms of research misconduct, just as it's going to enable publishers to catch research misconduct and identify it earlier. So I think you're going to continue to see research integrity issues. Just as we get better at finding them, technology will develop new ways of doing research integrity. I think on the whole, probably in that type of dynamic, the advantage goes to the attacker, so to speak, because they're going to come up with the new way of performing. The new form of misconduct is going to emerge first before we identify a detector for it. So I think research integrity will continue. The tool serves both sides.
Mm-hmm. You're in the interesting position of managing technology, but you don't have a technical background yourself. Do you think that's a limitation or a benefit?
I guess I don't think about it in those terms exactly. I think it's not necessarily about how much you know about publishing or how much you know about technology. It's about your willingness to ask questions and listen to people and practice critical thinking. And so if I don't have technical training from university outside of my work experience, but if I encounter a technical problem that I don't understand, then I ask a technologist, and then I have colleagues that I trust and I listen to them, and I think the same is true when we encounter tricky business model or business questions. That there just needs to be communication, and I try not to make decisions in a vacuum. I try to work with my colleagues and work with people that I trust. I think it does help that I'm quite interested in technology, and I like technology topics, and that I'm that's fun for me. That certainly helps. But I wouldn't say that it's a limitation exactly, as long as you're open to working with technology people.
Does that apply to AI, which is notorious for having aspects of it that are a black box that are difficult to comprehend?
Yeah, I would say it's a similar paradigm. You have it is hard to trust these black boxes, and I think in publishing, certainly in the sort of digital transformation of publishing, so the sort of early 2000s, 2010s, there's been a lot of work on the visibility, making workflows visible and understanding where a manuscript is at each stage of the process, and being able to follow it from submission to peer review to production to hosting and discovery. And when you get a black box tool like AI, that can somehow disrupt that visibility. It makes it harder to understand why something's happening. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. I think that the benefits can really the benefits could potentially be massive. And so it's our job to make sure we understand it and are applying it where it will be useful.
Mm-hmm. One of the aspects of perhaps more machine learning than AI that affected the scholarly community was the use of tools to do things like sort of subject tagging and identifying sort of relevant people. And many humans in the industry sort of resisted the idea that a machine could come up with better decisions than a human. Are you still encountering this kind of human resistance to using machine tools?
I mean, I certainly was one of those people. I mean, I remember when we built our first taxonomy at Hindawi, we ended up going with Access Innovations because we really wanted a tagging system we could understand. We wanted to be able to write logical rules that said, when you see mercury and it's in the chemistry context, apply it to the chemical mercury. When you see mercury and it's in the astronomy context, apply it to the planet, to the planet Mercury. We wanted to understand that and be able to curate that, but I don't know that, I don't think I was necessarily right. I mean, I think there is value in that, and it was, but it's a question of trust. I think if you trust the technology that it's getting it right, 100% of the time, then of course if you're a responsible sort of person trying to solve these problems, you have to consider it, because it will then enable so much automation, being able to do things faster, being able to roll out different taxonomies for different contexts more easily. So I mean, I would say it feels to me like it's changed, at least in my role, that I encounter less of that sort of fear and mistrust, maybe specifically of these sort of machine learning classification type problems, at least. But so yeah, I've been on that journey myself. I can completely understand where someone's coming from when they think like that.
You're a great believer, an exponent of open source software. When you were at Hindawi, I believe much of the platform you developed was open source. Are you still keen on open source?
Yes, definitely. I mean, open source is all around us. The internet, the web technologies, the cloud technologies, our cell phones, everything. These things would not exist without open source technology. So it's critical. It's critical to a healthy technology ecosystem, but it's not the only. It can't be the only solution, right? I'm also completely open to proprietary models. I think it has to do with the goals of your project and how you want to ensure the success or long-term sustainability of your project. So there are times when building a really vibrant and healthy community is going to be the best thing to ensure the success of your product. And so open source might contribute to that. There could be times when you want to perhaps have an open core of the code, but then have sort of proprietary add-ons. There could be something where the code is open and you sell services into configuring the code. There's just many flavors of it, and I think open source remains super important. But I wouldn't. I wouldn't call myself someone who is dogmatic about it and says that, okay, every project has to be open source to succeed. I think there should be a good reason. It's an approach to solving a problem.
Mm-hmm. Finally, you're in the remarkable position of having lived in several of the major cities of the world: New York, London, Cairo, Beijing. Which would be your preference?
New York, at least it would be my answer now. New York, because my family's here and my partner's family's here, so I'm from New York. And New York because New York has a fantastic public transportation system, and I don't drive or bike or do anything other than walk or take public transportation. So so New York for that reason, and New York because I love pizza, and this is the best place in the world to get pizza, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, that's great. Well, it's great to talk to you, Andrew, and I'm fascinated to see what innovations come out of your role at Sage, and hopefully you'll sort of see you're doing sort of major things just as you've done in your last publishers. So thanks very much for your time, Andrew, and I look forward to talking again.
Thank you, Michael. I really appreciate it. It's really nice to see you again.